What if I told you that some of Hollywood's most beloved stars spent their lives hiding their own children? That behind the sparkling gowns, flashing cameras, and carefully sculpted personas, there were babies born in silence, then erased, adopted, or hidden in plain sight. In the golden age of Hollywood, image wasn't just everything, it was survival. Studios like MGM and Warner Brothers controlled every inch of a star's public life, from the shade of lipstick they wore to whether or not the world was allowed to know they'd given birth. For some actresses, becoming a mother meant becoming a liability, and for the men, it was even easier: deny, disappear, and let the studio clean up the mess. But the truth has a way of resurfacing. This isn't just gossip. These are stories of children who grew up not knowing who their parents really were, of movie stars forced to hand over their babies to friends, to distant relatives, or to adoption agencies run by the studios themselves. Tonight, we pull back the velvet curtain on a secret chapter of Hollywood's past: the illegitimate children, the staged adoptions, the buried bloodlines. Which golden age icon do you think hid the biggest secret of all? Fact 1. Judy Lewis, the daughter Hollywood wasn't allowed to know. She was born with a face too familiar, those high cheekbones, that unmistakable chin. But growing up, Judy Lewis was told she was the adopted child of a kind single actress, Loretta Young. What no one told her not until decades later was that her real father was Clark Gable. The scandal would have destroyed both stars at the time. In 1935, Gable was married. Young was a rising actress with a saintly image. A pregnancy out of wedlock would have meant career suicide, so Young disappeared from the screen for months, claiming illness. The baby was quietly born in Los Angeles, placed in an orphanage, then retrieved and raised as her adopted daughter. Even as a child, Judy noticed the whispers. Why did everyone say she looked like Gable? Why did people treat her differently? And why did her mother never explain? It wasn't until Judy was in her 30s that the truth fully emerged, a studio-arranged lie that lasted a lifetime. Was Loretta protecting her daughter or her career? Fact 2. Charlie Chaplin's Secret Sons. Denial in the spotlight. Charlie Chaplin was a genius on screen and chaos off it. With a string of affairs and 4 marriages, his personal life was a minefield of scandal, but it was his relationship with actress Joan Barry that dragged his name into one of the most infamous paternity trials of the 1,940 seconds. Barry claimed Chaplin had fathered her child. He denied it fiercely, and the studios backed his silence. Blood tests later suggested he wasn't the father, but in 1,940 seconds America, the court didn't care. The judge ruled based on moral obligation, not science. Chaplin was forced to pay support for a child he claimed wasn't his. But this wasn't the only instance. Other women, too, came forward with whispers of pregnancies. Some settled quietly. Others vanished from public life altogether. Was Chaplin the victim of opportunism, or a powerful man dodging responsibility? One thing was certain. In a town where perception meant everything, even a silent film star couldn't escape the sound of a baby's cry behind closed doors. Fact 3. Ingrid Bergman. The Fall of a Goddess. Ingrid Bergman had it all: beauty, talent, and an image so pristine that the public saw her as near divine. But when she left her husband for Italian director Roberto Rossellini and bore him a child out of wedlock, the reaction was swift and brutal. The year was 1950. Bergman gave birth to a son in Rome, and overnight, her American career collapsed. She was denounced on the Senate floor. Letters flooded studios calling her an enemy of American values. What many didn't know was that the studio had long suspected the affair and had tried to contain the fallout. Her daughter Pia was kept from the spotlight for years. For Bergman, motherhood came at the price of public crucifixion. She wouldn't work in Hollywood again for nearly a decade. Was it love, rebellion, or a choice forced by years of control and silence? The woman once worshipped as a saint became Hollywood's most famous exile, all for choosing to keep her child. Fact 4. Loretta Young's adoption lie. A studio's silent blueprint. Loretta Young wasn't the only one to adopt her own child, but she may have been the one who perfected the script. When she brought baby Judy Lewis home months after the birth, the public believed she had adopted a needy child. The press applauded her kindness. Hollywood applauded her discretion. But behind the scenes, it was all theater. Warner Brothers helped coordinate the cover-up. Hospital staff were paid off. A Catholic orphanage cooperated without question. The system wasn't reacting to a scandal, it was rehearsing for it. This wasn't an accident, it was a template. In the decades that followed, other actresses with inconvenient pregnancies were quietly sent away. Returning months later, with a new adopted child. The children grew up thinking they were lucky, saved from obscurity. In reality, they were born into lies arranged by moguls in pinstripe suits. How many of these adoptions were genuine, and how many were studio-sanctioned secrets? Fact 5. Joan Crawford. The Mask of Motherhood. Joan Crawford famously adopted 4 children, a decision celebrated in the press and framed as charitable. But years later, her daughter Christina painted a darker picture in Mommy Dearest, claiming emotional abuse, control, and exploitation. Yet buried beneath the controversy is a lesser-known rumor that one of Crawford's adopted children may have been her biological child, a baby born in secret and reintroduced under new paperwork. There's no confirmation, only inconsistencies, mismatched timelines, sealed records, a sudden appearance of a child after a vacation. If true, it would follow the same playbook used by Young and others: hide the pregnancy, fake the adoption, preserve the star's image. But for Crawford, the mask of the loving mother may have been just another role, scripted, rehearsed, and weaponized. Did Joan adopt to love? Or to protect a truth too dangerous to reveal? Fact 6. The Studio Nurse. Keeper of forbidden births. Not all secrets were held by stars. Some were whispered into the ears of those behind the scenes, like the studio nurse, a quiet presence contracted by major studios to handle delicate situations. She wasn't just a midwife, she was a fixer. Her role: ensure that unexpected pregnancies didn't become public disasters. Actresses in trouble were sent away to rest homes in distant states. Births were recorded under fake names. The nurse ensured that the babies were adopted, often to pre-arranged families tied to the studio. These weren't isolated cases. From the 1,920 seconds to the 1,950 seconds, this network handled dozens, perhaps hundreds of silent deliveries. Some children were never seen again. Others, like Judy Lewis, grew up in the spotlight without knowing their origin. The stars got to return, glamorous and untainted. The children got edited out of the story. Who else vanished behind those hospital curtains? Fact 7. The baby on the set. Secrets hidden in plain sight. During the filming of a mid-1940 seconds melodrama, whispers circulated among the crew. A baby was often seen on set, held by an assistant, occasionally disappearing into a starlet's dressing room. She was single, devout on paper, and had just returned from a mysterious break. No one dared ask questions. The director looked the other way. The studio head issued a gag order. The rumor? That the child was hers, born in secret during a 6-month hiatus and brought to the set so she could see him during long shoot days. Eventually, the baby vanished from the studio lot. Months later, adoption papers appeared. The actress had generously taken in a child. To the public, it was charity. To the insiders, it was a masterclass in quiet manipulation. How many Hollywood families were built backward with the birth certificate forged only after the baby smiled for the camera? Fact 8. Errol Flynn, the illegitimate heiress. Errol Flynn lived fast, and his scandals moved faster. Affairs, arrests, whispers of espionage, nothing stuck to him for long. But one of the most persistent stories was also one of the most quietly buried: that he had fathered a daughter during a secret affair in the late 1930 seconds. The mother was never publicly named, but in private circles, a young actress who abruptly retired was said to have given birth at a sanatorium in Arizona. The baby was adopted. Flynn never commented. Decades later, a woman came forward claiming to be his daughter. The timeline matched. The resemblance was uncanny, but the proof? Gone with the studio's files and the nurse's silence. Was she chasing fantasy or uncovering a truth Hollywood paid to erase? When a man's charm becomes his best alibi, how many lives are rewritten to fit the script? Fact 9. Studio contracts, morality clauses, and maternity bans. By the late 1930 seconds, major studios began including morality clauses in contracts, vague, sweeping rules that gave them control over a star's private life. Pregnancy outside of marriage? Grounds for termination. Public scandal? Career suicide. For actresses, the message was clear. If you wanted to keep your name on the marquee, motherhood had to wait or be hidden. Some stars wore tight corsets for weeks to conceal early signs. Others were quietly written out of scripts and sent away to rest. The most chilling clause? That the studio could terminate a contract if the star's behavior brought public disrepute. In practice, that meant don't get pregnant or don't get caught. These weren't just legal tools. They were mechanisms of control, binding women to an image crafted by men in suits. Was the glamour of the golden age worth the price of erasing your own child? Fact 10. the actress who raised her sister, or so they said. In one of the most bizarre familial arrangements of the 1,950 seconds, a rising starlet returned to Hollywood with a child she claimed was her younger sister. The girl lived with her, traveled with her, appeared in carefully staged magazine spreads, always introduced as the sibling she helped raise. But behind closed doors, friends noticed the odd intimacy, the protective behavior, the silent tension. Later in life, a relative slipped. She was her daughter, everyone knew. The starlet had disappeared for nearly a year after a failed relationship with a powerful producer. She returned thinner, more polished, and with a sister in tow. Records were vague. Birth certificates were delayed. But the pattern fit: disappear, give birth in secret, return with a new family story. For the studios, this version was clean. No scandal, no shame, just a beautiful woman with a soft spot for her little sister. How many children were raised under the wrong name, just to protect the illusion of innocence? Fact 11. The Secret Apartment, Hollywood's quiet nursery. In a quiet building near Beverly Hills, a furnished apartment was leased under a shell name by a major studio. But no actors lived there. No rehearsals were held. Instead, it housed young women, mostly contract actresses who had disappeared briefly from public view. Some were visibly pregnant. Others arrived shortly after delivery. Nurses came and went. Drivers arrived at odd hours. Paperwork was signed in whispers. Once the child was born, the actress would return to the studio, often more glamorous than ever. The baby? Sent elsewhere, sometimes to adoption, sometimes nowhere the public would ever learn. This wasn't a rumor. Studio memos referenced the apartment as early as 1938. Journalists who got too curious were cut off. The nursery never made the headlines, but its walls held stories the silver screen would never dare script. How many careers were reborn only after someone else was erased? Fact 12. The actress who refused to hide and lost everything. One starlet, young, rebellious, luminous, refused to play by the rules. When she became pregnant by a fellow actor in 1947, she insisted on keeping the child and the truth. The studio warned her, marry him or disappear. She refused both. Within weeks, her contracts were revoked. Her photos stopped appearing in magazines. Her name was quietly erased from cast lists. She gave birth in New York, alone. The child, a daughter, was raised without wealth or fame. Years later, in interviews, the former actress said, "I lost Hollywood, but I kept myself." She never returned to the screen, but her act of defiance echoed for decades, a rare voice of honesty in a system built on illusion. What's more tragic, a career destroyed by truth, or a legacy built on silence? Fact 13. The actor who paid for silence in installments. He was a heartthrob of the 1,940 seconds. Clean-cut on screen, scandal-free in the press. But behind closed doors, his affairs were frequent and reckless. One resulted in pregnancy. The woman was a wardrobe assistant, not under contract, not protected. She refused abortion. He refused acknowledgement. Instead, an arrangement was made. Monthly payments wired anonymously to a Los Angeles P.O. box. For 18 years, no name ever attached, no visitation, no admission. The child grew up with questions. The mother died young. And when the payments stopped, so did any trace of connection. Only decades later did DNA match an aging star long since canonized by the industry to a forgotten man living in Fresno, who had no idea why he shared those unmistakable eyes. In Hollywood, money can buy silence, but only for a while. How many fortunes were spent hiding what a single sentence could have acknowledged? Fact 14. The birth certificate switch. In 1951, a tabloid nearly ran a story that could have detonated a studio's golden couple. The leading lady had given birth, despite no public pregnancy, and now appeared weeks later, slimmer, smiling, holding a baby, listed as adopted. The truth? The birth certificate had been falsified. The hospital had recorded the mother's name under an alias. The attending doctor signed non-disclosure agreements. The nurse who assisted? Hired months later by the studio as a medical consultant. The father, a married leading man, never commented, but internal studio memos referenced revisions to the PR rollout and need for complete seal on birth records. The certificate showed the baby's birth date, but not the parents' names, just confidential. Sometimes, a line of ink is more powerful than 1,000 cameras. What truths were rewritten, one document at a time? Fact 15. The Hollywood heirs who never knew. They live among us now, real people with everyday lives. Teachers, mechanics, dentists, people who grew up thinking they were adopted, abandoned, or born to strangers. But in dusty archives, sealed court files, and faded studio payrolls, they are connected to icons, to faces etched in cinematic memory. Some have suspicions, others have DNA. A few carry nothing but a single old photo and a resemblance they can't explain. Hollywood's golden age didn't just hide scandals, it buried entire bloodline. Not every secret child wants to be found. Not every star left clues behind. But the question remains, how many ordinary people were born of extraordinary silence? And what would you do if the silver screen turned out to be your family album? Hollywood's golden age glimmered with beauty, power, and fame, but behind its spotless smiles were children erased, identities traded, and families rewritten to fit a fantasy. The screen told one story. Reality told another, quieter, messier, more human. These weren't just secrets, they were lives. So now we ask you, which of these stories moved you the most? Do you believe the stars were protecting their legacy, or abandoning those who should have shared it? Drop your thoughts below. Let the curtain rise on the truth. And if you want more revelations from behind the golden facade, don't forget to subscribe because the next secret might be even darker.